All right, so I guess I'll just start from the beginning. It was in 2019, probably around like the beginning of the year. I had what I thought at the time was like acne, just like a small little pimple on my chest, which kind of is an unusual place to like have acne, but I didn't really think much of it. So, I just ignored it, kept on living life. And fast forward 8 months later, that same little thing of acne that I thought it grew to like the size of a golf ball. And even the crazy thing is that even when I had it, it didn't really bother me like too much. Like I didn't think it was anything serious for whatever reason. And it wasn't until I was at home one day and I took off my shirt and one of my sisters saw it and she was like, "What is that?" And I was like, "I don't know." And then she was like, "I'm gonna tell our mom." So she tells our mom and our mom looks at it and she's like, "You gotta get that checked out." And we had a family dermatologist that they knew of. So it took like 4 months after that before I went to see them. And that was February of 2020. So that was right before the pandemic. And at this point, like it had still continued to grow, but it was starting to bother me a little bit. So I would go to the gym sometimes and it got to a point where I couldn't even do a bench press with full range of motion because I would bring the bar down to my chest and the tumor, well, it turned out to be a tumor, but the bar would hit the thing and it would cause pain. So I couldn't just rep out like a bench press with full range of motion. And then with other chest exercises, I couldn't sit up with pretend there's like a cushion right here and I want to do like some sort of fly movement. I couldn't have my chest up to the cushion because the thing it would get in the way and it would hurt. That's the only time where I had like any sort of discomfort from it. But other than that, it didn't really bother me. And it also got to a point where if I wore certain articles of clothing, you could see it like sticking out. So if I wore like a sweatshirt or like a crew neck, you couldn't see it. But if I wore like a tighter shirt, like you'd be able to see like, oh, there's kind of something like on his chest, what is that? And I also had two of them too. So like the one that was on my chest was obvious because like people are, they're looking at me like from the front, but I also had a second one on my lower back. And that one started to grow too. But at the time, like when I got this one, I don't really remember if I had they looked kind of different, but I wouldn't say that the one on my back was like, I wouldn't compare it to acne the same way I looked at this one. Like this one was kind of reddish from the front on the surface. This one was more like my skin color. So, but I say all that to say that I had two of them, and this one on my back, it grew pretty big too. But anyway, we go to the dermatologist in February, and she checks it out, the dermatologist, and she confirms that it's a tumor, and I have to get it removed. So, of course, like that upsets pretty much my whole family. Like my mom's pretty emotional. She's crying, she's upset. But the weird thing is that I was kind of non-reactive. I had a kind of a stoic response to, finding out that you have a tumor, or actually two tumors, and you got to get them removed. I'm not sure why I had that sort of reaction. I just remember thinking that, this is unfortunate, but it's something that I'll overcome. I always had that sort of thought in my mind. I'm not sure why. I don't really know where that came from, but I was just like really strong-willed when I think about like the early days of like first finding out that I had a tumor. So then she references us to go to the Levine Cancer Institute, which is uptown, and I see a cancer specialist, and he's the guy who confirms that it's like a form of skin cancer, a rare form of skin cancer. Basically, I don't remember the exact name, but the abbreviation is DFSP. Basically, it's soft tissue sarcoma, so a rare form of skin cancer. And the rare thing about me in my case is that I had it in two places. So he thought that was like a pretty rare case, right? But this was in March of 2020, so that's pretty important because it was during the pandemic, and like at the time I had to go to the doctor by myself, which my mom didn't really like. The whole experience I had to go through it by myself because, you know, they were really protective of COVID, and, you know, they didn't want people to get infected and things like that. So that kind of made the situation a lot worse. And I think anybody else who would have been in that position probably would have, I don't know if cracked under pressure is the right way to phrase it, but they just would have had a very different response compared to the response that I had. You know, I was still kind of like, this sucks. I don't know why I'm going through this. I don't know like what I did to deserve this, but it's all gonna be all right when it's all said and done. So I was seeing this doctor off and on for about maybe 2 or 3 weeks. It actually didn't take very long for them to schedule the surgery, but I had the surgery scheduled in April of 2020. So I saw the dermatologist in February, saw the cancer specialist in March, and then I had the surgery in April. And what they were gonna do basically is make an incision 3 inches around the tumors to remove them. 1 inch was too short. 2 inches, it would have cut like the middle, like it would have cut my nipple in half. So they had to go 3 inches, which meant that my nipple had to go. And I remember at the time, that kind of upset me because I was thinking about like my appearance and how I was gonna look, how people were gonna treat me if like I had my shirt off and stuff. They would probably think that I looked, you know, kind of weird, or, you know, something was wrong with me. So that, I remember talking to my friends about it like before the surgery happened, and I was like kind of upset that I was gonna like not have a nipple. I thought I'd be kind of a weirdo. But, you know, it was just one of those things that, you know, I can't change it, you know, so it is what it is, as they say. You know, that's kind of what I had to adopt going forward. But, you know, long story short, right before the surgery, I'm speaking to the cancer guy, and then there's also a plastic surgeon. So they had to take skin from my thigh, and it's called a skin graft. So they take skin from one area of the body and then put it on another. They took skin from my thigh and put it onto my chest. So they removed the tumors and then they did the skin graft, and that was basically the procedure. I didn't go to an actual hospital. They had an area at the institute called one-day surgery. So I went through that whole surgery in one day. And the doctors said it was cool. I remember I went I think it was early in the afternoon. My mom picked me up at like late evening. I ate dinner, and probably like 20 minutes later, I immediately threw it up. Like my stomach just couldn't handle it. So this was in April, and for the recovery process, they had 2 suction cups on my body, and they were stapled in. And I had like the suctioning device, the thing that actually held the fluids that were being suctioned from the areas. I had to hold on to that, and it was always running. And I would not wish that on anybody because I couldn't sleep. I had to sleep on the side for one. So of course, like I have a suction cup here and then the suction cup here. So I can't sleep on my back or on my stomach. I have to sleep from the side for 2 weeks. I couldn't shower, so I couldn't take a bath. I couldn't take a shower. I basically had to use like a washcloth and just like use a hand and like wash like myself that way. So that was a very uncomfortable experience. And then because I had 2 suction cup areas, there was a lady who would have to come over to our house and replace it because it just filled up so quick. And even she was like, you know, this is kind of unusual. Like I've never had to do this before, but you've got 2 of them. So it just kind of goes to show that it was a rare circumstance. So that lasted 2 weeks. After that, I went to see the doctor. This was actually like a different doctor. I think this was specifically the plastic surgeon, not the cancer specialist. But I saw them, and it was basically time to like remove the suctions. And that was a very tough day because I didn't realize they were stapled together. I couldn't tell because of the way they like had it arranged on my body, but taking them off was very painful. And then that same day, I had graduated from college. I went to CPCC, and I was trying to get accepted to either NC State or Chapel Hill. And long story short, I didn't get accepted. So like that news, plus being in a lot of pain from like the surgery and all that, and like getting like the suction cup things removed, it was a pretty tough day. But that was all through April. And then I saw the cancer specialist again for the first time in March or in May. He wanted to do a checkup just to see how I was doing. Actually, no. Before that, I had to get a second surgery. So after they removed the suction cup on my lower back, it was like a crater almost. There was like a hole in my back. So they had to do a second surgery where they took some skin from, it wasn't a skin graft like the first one was, but they just took skin from my back and rearranged it to close the crater in my back. So I had to go back to one-day surgery and do the whole thing over again. So the first surgery was like around the beginning of April. The second surgery was around the end of April. And that one wasn't as bad as this one. The recovery process wasn't that long, wasn't as strenuous or painful or whatever, but I went through that. So fast forward to May, like I was trying to say. I saw the cancer specialist. It had been a couple of weeks since that second surgery, and he said that we had to come to a decision because I had this rare form of cancer, and they didn't want it to come back. So the options were radiation and chemotherapy. And because my situation was so rare, they didn't have a lot of data to go off of in terms of which had the higher success rate of preventing the cancer from coming back. I don't remember the exact numbers, but I want to say that going through chemo was like a 5 to 7% difference compared to doing 2 months of radiation therapy. And he was talking, I remember I was in his office and he had my mom on the phone, and he was trying to explain like the pros and cons, and there's a lot of side effects to getting chemotherapy. Like you lose your hair. I think it kind of messes with your hormones. There's a lot of side effects, a lot of negative side effects. So hearing all that really upset her. And of course, like here I am, I'm sitting down, like hearing all this, and I'm kind of just like, what? I'm like, yep, this sucks, but you know, I got this far, so I might as well, you know, I got to see it through, right? But long story short, I weigh the pros and cons. I probably take a couple of days to think about it, and I go for the radiation therapy. So from May to July, I go to the same institute but a different building, and they have like a mold fixture for my chest and my back where I lay on the machine a certain way where they can apply the radiation to my body. I do that Monday through Friday for 2 months straight. And I had to drive on my own because this was still during COVID, so no family, no support, pretty much just me the entire time. And I would say the interesting thing about that is I was 25 years old, and everybody who was in the institute with me, they were like twice my age, like 50s and their 60s. Like I was easily an outlier. So I don't know, that's just an interesting observation that I think about sometimes. Like man, why am I, like I'm so young compared to all these people, and I'm going through something that older adults tend to deal with in their life, and I'm so young, yet I'm in their same position. I don't know. I just think that's interesting to think about. But I go through the radiation therapy, and it works out. So at this point, it's at the end of July. So I go see the doctor, I think every 3 months, because they want to check up on me to make sure the cancer's not returning. And every time I'm getting ready to go, my mom's like, let me know how it is or whatever. And like, I wish I could go, but I can't go. And you know how moms are, they're like, they always assume the worst, and like they just have like a very strong attachment, and they just assume the worst or whatever. But, I deal with that. And at the time I'm always like, I'm fine, I'm healthy. And every time like I do my scans or they do blood work, everything comes back positive. There's no signs basically, because I had a pretty healthy upbringing. So this was a pretty abnormal thing in my life. And I think that's a big reason why like I had the reaction that I had, that, I'll just be fine. But, on the contrast, my mom just assumes the worst, and, she thinks like, what if he's not okay, this and that. But I go through that for like 3 months where I check up on the doctor. Eventually, I see the doctor twice a year. I think this was in 2023 or even 2022. And then this year, it got to the point where I see the doctor once a year. So I saw the doctor this most recent time in February, and he was like, it's been 5 years since you've had the cancer. And actually, at this point, my original doctor retired, so I had a brand new one. They actually gave me 2 new ones. But long story short, he was like, yeah, you've had it for 5 years. We've never had any signs of it returning. And I always get a CT scan where they, scan my abdomen and my pelvis, the areas where they have it. And then sometimes I also do some blood work. They're just extra ways to check to see if there's any signs of it returning, any abnormalities in my body. But yeah, he sees me and he's like, not a lot of people make it like 5 years being cancer free, but you did. And that was it. So he told me about this race that happens in the city. It's called the Sarcoma Stomp. It's a 5K, so nothing too crazy. I actually went to that earlier this year. Kind of a low-key race in terms of like the crowd compared to the other races that I've done. Not a ton of people, but a pretty interesting race. So I go to that. That was a good time. Met with some people, and it was a pretty good experience overall. My mom, my brother came to support. It's not a crazy long race, like it's only a 5K, so 3 miles, but that was a good experience to kind of round out where I am now. I think another thing too that's important to mention is that I think it was either in 2021 or around the end of 2020, I did a DNA sample because they wanted to know where it came from. And the crazy thing is that there's no history of it in my family. Definitely not on my mom's side, but I'm not that close with people on my dad's side, but I know he hasn't had cancer. But basically, I submit the DNA sample. It takes like a month for the results to come back, but the results are inconclusive. Inconclusive. I have no idea how I got this. To this day, I'll never know. Basically, that's kind of what I've accepted. You could call it a freak accident. You could call it whatever. You can call it whatever you want, but I have a pretty healthy upbringing. I had my wisdom tooth taken out, which is the only surgery I had before this, but never broken a bone, never been to the hospital, nothing. But for some reason, for reasons I'll never know or understand, I got this rare form of cancer, and it affected me in ways that I never would have experienced or wish on anybody. But if we fast forward 5 years later, I'm good as new, just with no nipple. And that's it.
What do you think was the biggest thing that you've learned from the whole 5 years?
The biggest thing I've learned? Probably that all adversity can be overcome, like to some degree. No matter how big you think it is or how big it may feel in the moment or in the moments where like it hurts and there's a lot of pain, I think you can get over it, and not just get over it, but like overcome it and come out stronger than you could have imagined.
They call you McChillin because you have that stoic personality, calm under pressure. So definitely you had a very strong mindset going into this. I know you said that you weren't super phased about it at the beginning. So if you didn't have that mindset, if you didn't think that things would be okay, how do you think that would have changed things?
I would have been a nervous wreck. I would have been afraid. I would have had a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety. The whole experience just would have been like 10 times worse. And it's kind of weird to think about back then that I had literally no fear, no anxiety. That's the thing, I can't explain where that comes from, because I think most of the population would not have that sort of response. But like even me, like verbalizing that out loud, I can't tell you where that comes from. I really can't. And it is kind of ironic how like I go by McChillin, that's like my gamer tag, my channel name or whatever. It does speak to like my personality. Like people don't usually see me angry or upset or like that emotional in most circumstances, but I think this is one where that sort of response would be easily understandable, and a lot of people would feel that same way, and it'd be valid if they did. But yeah, if I didn't have that mindset, I don't know if I would have like come out on the other side the way I came out. You know, I said I was insecure about not having like a nipple, and this was before I even started bodyweight training. So like I was going to the gym kind of consistently, and I did have some results, but I think like I wanted to get in really good shape because I thought, you know, being really shredded would offset people's initial perception of me. They would just ignore the scar and think that I'm this ripped dude, you know? And that's kind of what happened.
How did the experience affect your relationships with people?
You know what's crazy? I'm always open to talking about cancer. Like I think a lot of people would shy away from the fact that they had it because it's such a traumatic experience. But I've always looked at it as like it's a source of like inspiration, and it kind of gives people hope. So especially since it was a rare case for me. I'll also say too that it wouldn't have killed me according to the doctor, but if I had prolonged getting the surgery, it would have led to long-term health effects. So they could have caught it earlier, but you know, better late than never, as they say, and that's probably true in this case too, because who knows what would have happened to me if I waited like another 3-6 months before I actually saw a doctor and got it looked at. But yeah, I just embrace it now. So I think it's made me probably more open, more receptive to people, and I'm not quick to judge people, especially off first impressions, because you never know what somebody's going through. You never know somebody's full story, what they've been through, this and that. So I'd say those are some big takeaways.
Yeah, those are all the questions I had. Awesome.
Yep, just another cancer survivor just trying to make it, man. That's what it's all about. Hopefully this can shed some light to some people, maybe gives people some inspiration, some hope. There's light at the end of the tunnel, you know. People will always support you, whether they can be there physically or not. So you're not alone, and you'll see it through, and you'll come out better and stronger. I'd say those are my last words for it. Yeah.
Nice. Let's go.